or good morning, depending on when you're seeing this show over the internet. I'm Bob Irwin. We are coming to you live from the office of Alan Butel. He's a defense attorney here in Las Vegas, does criminal defense and civil litigation, and is a frequent guest on this show, and graciously lets us use one of his offices for broadcasting the show, which is terrific. This show is about guns, related politics, and self-defense issues. We are on KSHP Radio 1400 AM. That is a rebroadcast of this YouTube show, which we put up a new show roughly every Thursday night at 5 o'clock. If you're watching at this time that we're on, we're about on a 5-second delay, and we are here live. The YouTube version is available 24/7. If you look at Fired Up with Bob Irwin on YouTube, go to YouTube and Fired Up with Bob Irwin. You will find our website on YouTube, and there's shows going back 5 or 6 years now that you can see what I said 3 years ago that turned out to be absolutely wrong. Today's guest is firearms instructor and terrorism expert Lenny Davis. He's been with us several times. Lenny, I would like you to give a little background of your repertoire.
My repertoire, yes. Well, thanks. Yeah, my name's Lenny Davis. I'm a retired special agent with Department of Homeland Security. I spent several years as a anti-terrorism subject matter expert for the U.S. Department of State, training people all over the world. And I am currently the Director of Investigations and Training for a company called Textratics International here in Las Vegas.
Gone to the civilian side, more or less.
More or less gone to the civilian side, although they keep, I'm kind of like Michael Corleone, the State Department calls and keeps wanting to pull me back in, so, but I'm here.
You realize you're like Michael Corleone.
Yeah.
We'll add that to his resume. If you have a question or comment, you can send a text or an email to me at bob@firedupmail.com. And I'm going to say again, as I did last week, if it works. The email address here is kind of in limbo. We're having some mechanical problems with the websites and so forth. However, the phone number below that works. If you have a question or comment or want a gun show pass or to contact me for some other reason, you can call that number, and it's a recorder that's in my office. And it will allow you to leave a message and leave a callback number, please. I get one every once in a while that say, I'd like a pass to the gun show, thanks, click, and you don't get one. Anyway, I'm there if you need to get a hold of me for some reason. There are several hundred uses of firearms in self-defense every week in the United States, 200 to 300, depending on whose statistics you are willing to believe. Usually they're not covered by the mainstream media. They are only covered by the mainstream media when it's a gun owner that seems doing something foolish. And the hundreds of self-defense cases nobody knows about. So when we find those, what I tend to do on this show is use some of those. I generally don't use names. I use the city or state that it took place in, so you have an idea of the local laws. But some are good shootings I use, some are questionable. Once in a while I use one that's just plain foolish. But the idea is that listeners, watchers can put themselves in the position of the defendant, the shooter who's trying to protect himself, usually, and look at what would I do if I was in the same position. And we try to offer insights that will make you safe under most circumstances. Now, the rule on that is laws vary from state to state, particularly in self-defense issues. It's different. What is a good shooting, reasonable shooting in Nevada wouldn't be a reasonable shooting in New York City, and so forth and so on. So if you are involved in an actual case at the moment, you need to employ local counsel in your jurisdiction, your county or city or state, that knows the rules for the state you live in. They are vastly different depending on where you live. So you don't make that mistake of saying, Bob and Lenny said I should do this, and it turns out the law in wherever you are, New York City doesn't allow you to do that. Obviously, a shooting that's a good shooting in Wyoming is going to be vastly different in Washington, D.C.
Just the possession of the firearm in certain states is going to be vastly different.
In Washington, they'll say a good shoot, but you're in jail for possessing a firearm illegally. So there you are. This story comes out of the Omaha World Herald in Omaha, Nebraska, obviously. Prosecutors say a 45-year-old male had shown up at this house where his ex-girlfriend lives and lives there with his 3 children. He'd shown up several times a week to try to talk to the woman and his 3 children who live there. It happens. This encounter on August 2nd began when this 45-year-old banging on her door near 28th Avenue and Madison Street, if you know where that is, where she lives with several other women after she separated. The ex-girlfriend hid the children in an upstairs bedroom. There's been some violence between the two, and went to talk to the man. Then he attacked her. He grabbed her and threw her to the ground, choked her, according to Eric Fabian. He's the Douglas County Attorney's Office that looked into the case. The woman was able to get away, but the male came after her again, hitting her in the back and arm with a pipe as she tried to run away. He said he was going to kill her and the other women who lived there. One of the other women had a firearm, told him to stop and back away. The attacker then said, "Go ahead and shoot me," and continued to swing the pipe. The woman fired her gun as he had requested. It makes it so easy when they ask you to shoot them. Arriving officers found him lying in the backyard with a gunshot wound to his abdomen. The county prosecutor has determined the shot was fired in self-defense. The 45-year-old is charged with felony domestic violence assault, 4 counts of making terrorist threats, and the judge set his bail Friday at $125,000. Obviously, domestic violence is a huge problem in the United States, and I'm going to assume that the victim had applied for a protective order. They issue them everywhere in the United States. And that didn't stop the incident. Around 15% or 20% of the guys who receive their protective orders disregard them in some way. Some just through more or less stalking, and a few through violent attacks like this. I expect this jerk will be asking to be shot. Won't make much difference under Nebraska law. But it could hurt the shooter's self-defense claim. I may run this by an attorney in next week's show and say, does that really make a difference? If they ask you to shoot them, well, is that a defense? I just did what he told him to do. He told me to do. I'm not sure, but
well, I think the fact that he continued to swing the pipe, so he was still a threat. So even though he said, "Go ahead, shoot me," and continued to swing the pipe, my only thought would be never bring a pipe to a gunfight. And he ended up on the wrong end of this. I think this is absolutely good shooting, so good self-defense shooting. It's why we carry guns.
Exactly, and going back through what happened here, he shows up, he's beating on the door, he's got a pipe, he at gunpoint, he still attacks this woman and is beating on her. The scary part of this story is what didn't happen, because the gun was there. Where would this woman and the woman with the gun and the other women who lived in the house be at this moment if they had not had a gun in there to defend themselves? Mm-hmm. And he's there with a pipe beating on everybody. They'd all be dead.
Yeah. I mean, you look at this guy, he's strangling or choking a woman. He's not, in having a calm discussion. He's literally trying to murder her, and then he hits her, gets a pipe and starts swinging a pipe. And at that point, I don't see why this would be anything but a really good shooting.
Well, yeah, this is why the prosecutor's already determined. They had him on the case from the beginning. The police got him there the same night it happened, or a representative of the prosecutor's office. And he went through it step by step by step, and that's why I use the story, because they found it as a justifiable shooting.
Right.
Already. Now, there may still be a civil lawsuit related to that, those always happen. If you shoot somebody and you're even perfectly at it, it's perfectly good shoot, are you likely to be sued? Yes. That unfortunately is one of the side effects of our legal system. Anybody can sue anybody for anything, anytime.
Right. I think this one, though, it wouldn't stand very much of a chance in a civil suit. I think a judge would look at it and go, wait a minute, this was a complete self-defense shooting. It was found completely justifiable by the DA's office. Case dismissed.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
But
of course, you're going to end up,
your attorney to stand there
exactly. Yeah, you're going to end up going through it, folks.
You still have to get in it when you're sued. You have to defend it, or they win.
Yes.
So don't go to court for anything without an attorney or side. The legal system is complicated. Things will happen you're not ready for. Sponsor Grant Defense at 5580 South Decatur. That's at Russell and Decatur. Here in Las Vegas, they manufacture AR-15s, several models, and some really neat custom Glock pistols. I would encourage you to take a look at their place. You can find them on the corner of Russell and Decatur. Their back door opens to the back door of the Dewey Animal Shelter, so you can go in and get a guard puppy while you're there. You can reach them at 702-675-3901. They have a website being put up as of a couple of days ago. It still wasn't there, but they will have grantdefense.com if it gets put together. I know about having website problems, so we're on the same page, me and Mr. Grant.
So you can go there and get a pistol and a poodle, huh? Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, that's... I love dogs. They bark and make noise, and that tells the guy to run off. Dogs can be defeated, but they wake you up. They're the cheapest alarm system you can get. And they're cuddly and whatever, so it's a good thing. Panama City News Herald reported on the 15th of this month, this is in Chipley, Florida, a Panama City beach man was shot by a Chipley homeowner during an overnight burglary Sunday, according to the Washington County Sheriff's Office. The WCSO reported that the homeowner in the 1800 block of Pettis Road was awakened by his wife around 2:45 a.m. She heard a loud noise outside the house. This is early Sunday morning. The man reported finding three males burglarizing a vehicle in his front yard. That vehicle had a firearm in it. He keeps a gun in his car for self-defense on the road. We'll address that in a minute. In front of the suspects with an AK-47, a serious homeowner, they began to flee. However, one suspect, a 19-year-old, turned back toward the homeowner in a manner that made him fear he was about to be shot, so the homeowner opened fire. The suspects reportedly fled in a black Honda. The homeowner normally kept a firearm in the vehicles. Deputies quickly found the suspect's Honda sitting in the middle of Pettis Road. Now, we're at 2:45 a.m. here, folks, right? Not a lot of traffic out. It's pretty easy to stop the guy who's driving away from the house at 3 in the morning. Not a lot of traffic. They did a traffic stop and ordered the men in the vehicle out. They reported seeing a 19-year-old drop a small bag, turned out to be marijuana. He then advised deputies he had been shot in the leg. He was transported to Bay County Hospital for treatment. The deputies found a loaded 9mm handgun inside the Honda, and the homeowner's handgun was found in the tree line nearby. So the guy had his own gun and had the homeowner's gun that he tossed out. A 15-year-old in the car was transported to the Department of Juvenile Justice on charges of grand theft of a firearm, 2 counts of burglary of a dwelling structure or conveyance, obstructing justice, tampering in a felony first-degree proceeding. Yeah, everybody lied. They got charged with everything here. A 19-year-old from Panama City Beach was taken into custody and transported to the county jail on charges of grand theft of a firearm, 2 counts of burglary, and so on. The wounded 19-year-old is charged with grand theft of a firearm, 2 counts of burglary of a dwelling structure or conveyance, obstructing justice, tampering in a first-degree felony, and possession of marijuana less than 20 grams. the whole point of this is obviously these three guys were burglarizing a car. The car had a gun in it. Now the homeowner comes out and they're in his car. If your car, you know, what you do is you hide in the house and call the police. In this case, there's a gun in the car that is accessible, so the homeowner's kind of stuck. I mean, they're letting these guys drive off with a loaded gun. It turns out they had their own already, as we found out. But if you have a gun in your car, this is the advice. It's got to be locked in some manner, that a lockbox, something that you can, they make little gun safes you can bolt on the floor of the truck where you open them with your fingers. They cost, you know, a couple $100. You get the gun open on your fingerprint. There's all sorts of ways to secure the gun. Or don't leave it in the car. Cars get stolen. You hand it over to the valet parking guy all the time. You ever think, did you check to see if your gun's still there when you come back out? You loan your car to a friend to drive down to the 7-Eleven because his car's broken, and you've just given him your gun, and he doesn't lock your car. The advice is to keep your defense gun on you. That way, when you get in the car, you have the gun in your car. When you get out of the car, you're not leaving the gun in the car. That may not work in all situations. Everybody has different problems. But that way, if you carry the gun all the time, like you should if you have a permit to do such, or a Mother May I card from the government, you have the gun when you're in the car, and you take the gun when you're out of the car. I realize it doesn't work for everybody, but leaving the gun unsecured in the car is a problem.
Yeah, we, as you well know, for several years when I was a special agent, I was on our special response team, our SWAT team. And of course, I had all sorts of weapons and explosives and tactical gear. And we'd had several in Los Angeles. Our home office had several vehicles stolen and weapons stolen. And so it became policy that unless we had a very secure vault type thing, which I did at the time, that you couldn't leave a gun in the car. And if you did, you would face discipline.
Oh yeah, we've had Secret Service lose.
Secret Service, FBI, SWAT in Atlanta. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that. I mean, we've had lots of law enforcement lose guns that are in cars. Yeah. Years ago, when I was managing a movie theater, we're going back 35 years, probably 40 years, in Monrovia, California, of all places. And I had some teenagers that worked around the theater for passes, help and clean things, needed a lot of repairs, painting things, whatever. And as I was closing one night, one of them walks up to the outside and says, "I need your help." And I said, "What?" And another one walks around the corner and he's got a police shotgun. And I said, and it says Monrovia PD in stencil on the butt. "Where'd you get?" "Well, this cop didn't lock his car, so we swiped it. And now we're afraid we can't go turn it back in. We'll get arrested." So,
duh.
So I covered for them. I recovered the gun, called the police department. The guy came over, sergeant came over, and I said, "Did you know this was missing?" He says, "Well, we got a guy in there that is still out on patrol, didn't come in at the end of his shift, and now I know why." So, fortunately, it was stolen by kids that just did it for a lark and weren't going to shoot anybody with it. Probably wouldn't happen today, but the guns have to be secured in cars. I mean, they just have to be. Everybody's got their individual problems, but do that. Jerry Creed, an attorney friend of mine, does firearms trusts and Class 3 firearms trusts. If you have a firearms trust, you need to get somebody to look at it. The laws are changing every 5 minutes at ATF right now, usually to the good of gun owners. They're changing things to make them easier and simpler. But if you have one you got off the internet and it's 2 pages long, a bare minimum firearms trust or a Class 3 trust will run 18 or 19 pages to cover all the stuff they do now. Call Jerry, have him look at it. Jerry Creed, C-R-E-E-D. He's at 702-806-7777. I always run a story about teenagers that are doing stupid stuff because we have such a high rate of juvenile crime. This is from the Richmond Standard on the 8th of August in Richmond, California. The story goes, if it wasn't concerning enough to find a 13-year-old boy hanging out in a truck parked in a high crime area at 4 a.m., Richmond police said they also found him in possession of a loaded rifle. 3 males who police found inside the truck in the 400 block of Nevin Avenue, July 14th, were between the ages of 13 and 15. The incident unfolded when a patrol officer came upon the parked truck with its lights on. Officers approached the 3 teens in the truck who couldn't explain why they had the truck or why they were hanging out at 4 o'clock in the morning. It turns out the 15-year-old in the car took his grandfather's truck without permission. A search of the truck revealed a loaded rifle. There's a Mossberg 22, actually. A weapon determined to have been brought by the 13-year-old. Richmond Police Lieutenant Felix Tan said all 3 juveniles were taken to Richmond Police Headquarters, where the 13-year-old was booked. The police also contacted the family members of the other teens and returned the truck. They discovered the 13-year-old had an arrest warrant for removing his ankle monitor because he's already on juvenile parole for crimes, whatever, they didn't go into. He didn't figure out when you cut your ankle monitor off, it sets off an alarm. They can't find you because they don't know where the monitor is, but they know it ain't on you.
Yeah.
They didn't cover that in juvenile delinquent school. Anyway, all 3 teens are in police custody. A 13-year-old was arrested for the firearms violation in addition to his previous warrant. The 15-year-old and the 3rd teen were released separately to their parents' custody, and the truck was returned. You know, we've got a teenager here. He's a full-blown professional criminal at age 13. He's got an illegal possessing a firearm. They didn't go into, apparently the firearm was taken from his house. There are no solutions to this. This is lack of parent. What are you going to do? Send him home to his mother?
There's nothing you can do. 40 years ago, when I lived in the Bay Area, Richmond was a bad place then. I can imagine what it's been like now. They've had some officers killed there. I mean, it's not.
Oh, yeah. I did some research on it because I wasn't familiar with Richmond, California. It is you don't want to go there.
Yeah.
I mean, the crime rate is just ludicrous. The police department is overrun. They're just in horrible shape. You know, when you buy a house online because it's cheap, if it's in Richmond, California, go take a look at it. Anyway, it's
the scary thing. It won't be cheap in that area.
The police are just absolutely overrun. But there has to be some solution, and I don't offer it here. You know, when this appears online on AmmoLand's, they republish these on ammoland.com. Maybe somebody will come up with a good solution other than, you know, the stuff people are, well, they should kill them all when they're 12, you know. But in reality, what do you do with a 13-year-old hardened criminal who obviously doesn't have supervision at home?
Therein lies the problem.
A brief note here, and I just threw into the middle of my notes here. If you have, there's a new SIG pistol out called it's 9mm called a P320. It's a SIG version of a Glock. Yeah, here we go again with another, you know, striker fired. But this is SIG's version. It apparently has a problem they have discovered when it's dropped with the safety on and it lands on the hammer, which it generally will because the back of the gun is heavier than the front. It goes off. They're not supposed to do that. If you have a SIG P320, they're brand new guns on the market. If you have a SIG, you would have bought this within the last year.
Oh, yeah.
Brand new stuff.
Probably the last 6 months.
Several law enforcement agencies have adopted these already, and that's where this first information came from. Anyway, have one of these, contact your dealer where you bought it, and they will send it in for you and do a voluntary upgrade. That means you're going to get some new parts, the safety and hammer and whatnot. I understand they're being replaced. They're free, but they do apparently have something mechanically wrong with them. and SIG is replacing parts for free, as you would expect SIG would. They're a very reputable company, and they are just in horrible mental state, if a company can be in a horrible mental state over this, because they've made some government sales. This is one of the guns that got approved for the military.
This is the new United States military pistol.
Yeah.
So it has been approved, and they are in the process of purchasing.
I understand it's been approved. I don't know if they actually gotten any yet.
I believe the first ones went to, I read something the other day where the first ones went to, I believe, the 82nd Airborne. There was a frontline unit like that.
So if you're in the 82nd Airborne, watch out for the guy next to you dropping his pistol. Now, I want to rag on SIG. They make excellent products, and I'm sure they will fix this. It's just, things happen.
This is not the first handgun or firearm that was brought to market that had problems with it, and it won't be the last.
Well, they didn't want Glocks because they didn't have a safety.
Yeah.
Oops. There's lots of jokes here, but SIG is a great company, and they stand behind their products, and I'm sure this will be taken care of. And I'm quite sure it won't happen again.
No.
It went through all the military tests and passed everything.
There's a lot of
like, what?
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy. I've been reading a lot of articles, a lot of stuff, of course, flying around on the internet with the internet gun store commandos. But it seems that SIG has looked at this and decided that there's a modification. I believe it's a heavier trigger assembly is what I read yesterday. Yeah. So they're going to do that free of charge, which is like Bob says, SIG is SIG's a very, very fine company. I own several SIG weapons myself. So
what brand do you not own several of?
I don't have a Beretta. Oh, I take that back. I do have one Beretta, a small one though, not an M9.
We always talk on this show about training, knowing what the rules are and how to make your firearm work. Where I used to work, the gun store in East Tropicana, they do offer low-cost concealed carry classes every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. You can sign up on their website, thegunstorelasvegas.com. The advantage here is they run the class every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. If you want a renewal or you're a first-timer, you can show up just before 9 o'clock and you'll get into the class. Or you can sign up online, but they run the class. You won't show up at the store you're trying to go to and they'll say, I'm sorry, we only had 2 people sign up and we can't do the class unless there's 5 or whatever. They run the class. Thegunstorelasvegas.com. Besides that, I know the guy that wrote the outline. He's me. And it's valid training. One other story here. This is KTRK TV. It's ABC 13 in Northwest Harris County, Texas. This is on the 4th. A Texas store owner is in critical condition after investigators say a 26-year-old male suspect entered the store and shot the owner during a holdup. The guy just walked in and fired. The owner, who was wounded, grabbed his own gun and shot the robber. Good for him. It happened at the Lakewood Food Mart on Cedar Point near Grant Road, if you know where that is, around 10:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Both the owner and the robber were transported to the hospital where the suspect died. The owner is recovering from his injury. Deputies believe a woman was also involved in the robbery. They said she went inside to case the store before the robber stepped in. She may have left the area in a tan sedan. She waited outside, and when the guy got shot, she took off. Isn't love grand? A family friend who was interviewed by the media said the store owner is not the type of person to carry a gun, but he has had to carry one because he keeps getting robbed. He added the owner has a wife and 2 young children. Couple of things here. The owner of a small business who doesn't have a gun, we're talking phone stores, smoke shops, convenience stores, gas stations. If you're up, especially in the evening, in hours of darkness, which this was 10:30 at night, I believe. Yeah. Actually, more robberies happen in the daytime. More at nighttime, everybody seems to get shot more for some reason. If you don't have a gun, you're committing suicide. Criminals today that do these robberies kill victims just to prevent identification, for street credibility, sometimes just to show they've shot somebody, for initiation, no reason at all. Sometimes it's just their personal thrill to be able to say they killed somebody. They're animals, guys. I have a gun. If you don't have a gun, you are leaving your customers and your employees out there. I would suggest firing from cover. I don't know the situation here that maybe the business owner, you can't second guess the guy who was there at the scene.
Right.
We don't know how far away the guy was, what cover was available. Maybe he's standing out in the middle of the store when this happened. And the solution is you just shoot it out toe to toe. And fortunately, he survived. But the point of the story is, if you've got a convenience store, shoot from cover.
Well, kudos to this gentleman, because he did return fire and mortally wound his adversary after he was wounded, which showed a lot. And again, we don't know what we don't know what kind of firearm it was, where he was wounded, or anything. Bullets and handguns and people do weird things, as you well know.
Yeah,
so
people die from wounds they shouldn't die from all the time, and vice versa. So
yeah, so I mean, I've seen people horribly shot up who survived, and I've seen people that have been shot only once and were just inside completely a mess and passed away. So,
and I've worked on cases where the guy died where he shouldn't have died, but they give up. They presume they're going to die because they were shot. And most people who are shot don't die. The vast majority, because of Flight for Life and better medical training and things they can do. If you're shot, get medical help there quick. Seconds literally count. But the saves they can make are amazing.
And a lot of it is your mental attitude. If you're shot, you hang on. You see people. It happened about 30 years ago, as I recall. There was a police officer wounded in the upper arm with a .22 rifle, and I believe he was in Portland, Oregon, but I'm not 100% sure. I'll have to go back and find it. But he basically had grown up like we all did. Got shot, and you see a Western or you see a movie, and a guy gets shot and he falls down and he dies. And when the real life, as we know, is not that way. But this officer literally put himself into shock and passed away. So, I mean, it's one of those things that you fight. I don't think it's a great, trust me, I've been in 2 gunfights. I've been hit twice. I don't like it.
Don't show the scars, please.
No, I'm not going to do that. No scars thanks to Kevlar, but I've been there, and it's not fun. I don't like to be there. I don't ever want to be there again. But if I have to, I will. And woe be on the individual that decides that they want to shoot me, because I'm going to do everything in my power to tell them that was probably the last mistake they're ever going to make.
I'm one of the issues with Fired Up is that I don't actually derive any income from the show. I sell my books at gun shows and things. So I'm going to try and change that. This is my Sean Hannity book, my Sean Hannity moment. I have this book that I wrote a few years ago. It's been updated several times. The Reality of Armed Self-Defense. It has basically the philosophy that you're hearing from me on the show and from Lenny about how to defend yourself and how to defend yourself in court, how to interact with the police when you're at the scene, how to interact with the bad guys. The books are $10. I will have a new sign up here next week. This website is not exactly working yet where it's supposed to be. We changed vendors and it's been a nightmare. However, if you call the number below, that's a recorder in my office, and I will call you back and give the information where to send the money. But if you want to write it down, you can right now. You send it to Bob Irwin, P.O. Box 97413, Las Vegas, Nevada 89193. This was just worked on just as we're going on the air, so I don't have assignment up yet. I will next week. So you can find some place to write, and right now, because I'm no longer with the gun store, I get a lot of mail there, but it gets trashed sometimes. So we're going to start using the P.O. Box, which I've had for years and years. So you can write there and send me $10 with your address, and I will send you a book, and I'll have that on the screen next week. Speaking of next week, I'm sure we're addressing today on the 17th or 18th, or what is it? 18th today.
Or no, excuse me. You had me confused. 17th.
Yeah, we had a humongous terrorist attack in Spain last night. As it happens, Lenny is quite a specialist in counterterrorism and understands the issues. We have had several others. We have the terrorist attack in Virginia that took place also. And we had discussed, Lenny and I, discussing it on this show, and what we've decided to do, what I'd like to do, is do a special show next week dedicated to that. We will have more information, obviously, on the shooting in Spain and Barcelona, and who's there and who's not, and whether ISIS really did it or they just claim credit for it.
As I was getting ready to come here this afternoon, ISIS official news mouthpiece, if you will, they took credit for it. They don't know. Of course, law enforcement has not put the dots together yet. It's still way early in this thing. They did take 2 into custody, which is awesome. About 90 miles in a town about 90 miles from Barcelona. Last night, they had an explosion at a house, and initially they thought it was a gas explosion. Fire department and law enforcement shows up. 1 person was killed, 1 was wounded in the house, and it turns out it appears to have been a bomb manufacturing plant. A lot of, and you know, that's going to be a treasure trove of good information and intelligence. Bomb makers make the bombs the same way. They learn from day one, and what works, they continue to use it. So it's their signature. So they will, I'm sure, develop out some of the intelligence and evidence going through that. They'll figure that out. I don't know if the bomb maker was killed or his assistant or what the story is, but I had just heard that. I had heard the official death toll as of an hour or so ago was 13 dead, over 100 injured, 15 are on the critical list, and the Spanish authorities expect the death toll to go up. So it was a straight vehicle attack on a very busy tourist section of Barcelona, filled with tourists from all over the world. It's a very popular place to go. If you're familiar at all with Barcelona, the street is called La Rambla. It's a very popular, there's restaurants and all sorts of things, shopping and everything there. It's almost the Rodeo Drive of Barcelona. Right. And this guy traveled, these gentlemen, they took 2 into custody. They don't know yet whether or not either one of them is the driver, but they have 2 of them in custody. But they drove for several blocks running over people. So it's a tragedy. my heart goes out to the people of Spain and the people who were injured and killed.
They are just taking out innocent people just for notoriety. Kind of like when I mentioned with the gangbangers, they just want credibility. They want to prove they're the baddest guy on the block, and they're going to try and kill us all. Anyway, the take next week is going to be going through and fleshing out this attack and what happened, and a few others that are going on at the same time. We just had one in Virginia, as I said earlier. Same attack, driving a car through people. What you can do if you are caught in the middle of this. You are not the Army. You've obviously got to protect yourself, but we will come up with some at least half well thought out solutions to what happens, what you should do: run, hide, fight if you have to, carry your gun. I'll say that about 90 times next week, so we'll get there.
You are your own first responder. You are the very first responder to you and your family. So I highly recommend, if you are in a jurisdiction that allows you to legally carry a concealed weapon, get the training, practice, get a weapon, and carry it. I'm not saying that because I'm a gun nut, because I'm really not. I've been in the firearms business off and on as far as an instructor and trainer for virtually all of my adult life. But I say that in the fact that it's not a political statement, it's a survival statement. No matter where you go, if you can carry a weapon, you are going to increase your chances to survive if you are carrying a firearm and you know how to use it.
Have a gun, practice with it, and know the rules for engagement so you don't get killed and your family doesn't get killed. Then there's rules about, now the cops show up, what do you do now, and so on and so on. So we're going to cover all of that if you are caught in the middle of one of these situations. And those of you who are listening, most of our listeners are in Las Vegas. We are clearly a terrorist target here.
Oh.
And I can see the crowds on the Strip that these guys are just salivating to find a way to get in here and do something stupid. Anyway, we will address all of that seriously next week. There's a story here I want to do anyway, because I wrote a note to myself, Skip, but it's kind of appropriate for what we're just starting to talk about. This is KPNX TV 12. It's in Mesa, Arizona, on the 12th of this month. A man showing up for work at Cindy's Cafe near Center Street and McKillips Road was confronted outside the business by an armed assailant. A spokesman for the Mesa Police told 12 News the intended victim then pulled out his own handgun in order to defend himself. So far, so good. Police believe that the gun went off accidentally, striking the robbery victim in the leg. The armed robber then ran off. The guy trying to draw his gun shot himself. This was all over all the left-wing websites. I subscribe to a lot of them to keep up with what the enemy's doing. And if you send $1 to Nancy Pelosi, she will send you a $20,000 worth of mail for the rest of your life. I'm draining the Democratic Party. And it was the best dollar I ever spent. But anyway, most of these websites, you subscribe to conservative pro-gun websites, Guns and Ammo TV and all these guys. They have the equivalent on the other side. And this was run all over, so I'm not giving away any secrets. Everybody on the left side of the gun issue has seen the story. Anyway, he went to draw his gun, shot himself. The incident's under investigation. He's expected to survive his injuries. And they ask if you have information on this case, you can contact the Mesa, Arizona Police Department. If you're the guy that ran away, I mean, the silly part of this, an armed citizen stops a crime with his own gun. It's a clever variation of a warning shot.
painful one.
Can I say this on here? The robber quickly determined if the victim would shoot himself, he would certainly shoot the robber, so the guy ran away. I hate to say that, but it's a painful way to fire a warning shot. There's all sorts of jokes here, but it's not really a joke. If you don't practice with an empty gun, obviously when the chips are down, now the guy's in panic because he's got a gun in his face, and he goes to pull his gun and he set it off somehow when it was still pointed at his leg. I've seen it half a dozen times in training. Police cadets have the ability to shoot themselves in the foot or nearly shoot their foot on a pretty regular basis if you don't really lean on them. I was a really mean range master, and I have never had anybody in 28 police academies, and I couldn't tell you how many security academies. I'd never had a student shoot himself while I was running the range. But I sent a few of them home too. So it's once a guy, you're training a guy, and once he demonstrates that he's dangerous with a gun, and you keep him there, who catches the lawsuit when he shoots another student?
A good friend of mine was training some foreign students in the State Department class. We were at the training facility at the same time. I had other students. He had a different country. And he was telling me about the most horrific story I've ever heard. This guy could not shoot a Glock 17 pistol. He was not hitting the target from 5 yards away. And these guys are supposed to be the anti-terrorism police of those countries. I'm not going to say the country. But then my friend noticed that this guy had a black streak the side of his face up under. They wear Kevlar, the students wear Kevlar helmets, full body armor. It's a SWAT type situation. And this guy was not able to hit the target at 5 yards away at all. Just was not hit. I don't know where the rounds were going. So
I know where one went.
Yeah. Well, my buddy was watching this guy, and he went over to watch this guy, and he shoots. I don't know if he hit the paper or not, but he talks to his buddy, and he goes, you know, with a loaded Glock pistol, with his finger in the trigger, if any of you are familiar with a striker-fired pistol, all the safeties are internal, and they're initiated by the trigger. And he took the gun, and he was doing finger in the trigger going, I don't know what's going on here. My friend, of course, immediately pounced upon him and took his pistol away from him. And the rest of the course, that young man, I guess, had to go with the blue gun. He was not allowed to use firearms the rest of the class. I don't know what their country did with this young man, but he's lucky to be alive. Had he bounced something, he would have shot a round into his own brain, and it would have been game over.
Yes. Rick Mead, when we were teaching, he's an instructor for Metro. Now he's a Nye County Deputy Sheriff, but we were teaching academies together, and he was on the line, and I was a little back from the line, and one of the students realized when we said, load and make ready, the first thing you do is put your earphones on there, and then you load, we all shoot you. And the guy forgot to put his earphones on. He's got them sitting on top of his head instead of over his ears. And they start firing the string, and he realizes that there's this really loud sound. So with his Glock in hand, grabs his earphones to pull them down. Rick was standing right behind him, and there's no time to say stop or anything. He just, and the guy got the earphones down, started firing away. Rick is wandering away from the firing line going, yeah.
Bob and I are surprised that we have survived this many years, because it seems to take years off your life sometimes when you're running a range, and you have a student that has that, as we so affectionately call it, a brain fart, and just seems to go away for a moment. And it's happened on countless times.
This is a story from WBIC Radio 93.1, a talking story, not a video one. It's in Greenwood, Indiana. An Indianapolis man is in jail after police say he broke into someone's home only to be held at gunpoint by the homeowner until officers arrived. It's a good non-shoot story. Greenwood police say a 46-year-old intruder had entered a home in the 800 block of North Madison around 1:45 in the morning, 2 a.m., and he comes in the house. A woman in the home said she and her husband woke up to the sound of breaking glass in another room. That's when officers say the man in the house grabbed a gun, found the intruder in his spare bedroom. Investigators say the homeowner held him at gunpoint until police arrived, and they took him to jail. According to the officers, the intruder claimed he had been next door and was trying to stop a friend from entering the home. A friend of his was going to break in, and he's trying to stop the guy. So he went into this guy's house to stop his friend from doing a burglary. Investigators say the friend was never found or identified. The police also find several items from inside the home belonging to the couple laying in the yard. There was a woman there too. And he's got them both at gunpoint in the yard. The perp is in the Johnson County Jail without bond. Officers say he has a felony arrest warrant in Marion County for possession of a firearm. So he's a prohibited person on top of that. I just like this because obviously a prohibited person, he already has a prior for possessing a firearm, so there's some other felony out there probably. It's not really smart to do burglaries while you have a felony warrant outstanding. You know, because no matter what you first say, as soon as they run you, they're going to arrest you. But I got to give him credit for the story. I love this. I was trying to stop my imaginary friend from burgling into the home. He was just trying to stop a crime.
Well, you know, Harvey has got a, you know, James Stewart's buddy is still around. Mr. Stewart is gone, of course, but Harvey, the great mythical rabbit, is still around, and he's got a rap sheet as long as your arm. Because Harvey has been implicated in driving so many stolen cars by people who were, I didn't drive the car, I was riding in it. Harvey drove the car countless times.
I love this. I can't imagine the cops looking at me and say, no, I was trying to stop my friend from burglarizing the house, so I followed him in, but he had the guy's stuff in his pockets from the house. Yeah. He's just an honest citizen trying to prevent a burglary. So let me do my little closing thing and see if we have time for another story. We're about at 7 minutes now. Gun shows, not this weekend, but next weekend, the Crossroads of the West Gun Show. It's August 26 and 27 at Cashman Field. We do have a table there for Fired Up. So I will be down there if you at least most of the day, particularly on Saturday. This is not next Saturday, but a week from. If you have a question or comment or something you'd like to ask me in person that you don't want to put on my answering machine, I understand that. But I will be there most of the day. I've got some free passes for that show. If you want to send me a note to that Bob at P.O. Box 97413, Las Vegas, Nevada. I'll have a sign up next week, but it'll be too late to mail me then. So give a call at that phone number and leave me your information. I will mail you a pass to the show. I've got about 20 left, I think, at the moment. I think I got one in my pocket. Yes, they look like that on the front and have a secret thing on the back. So you can't print that off the screen and try and get into the show. Anyway, I've got half a dozen of those left. If you want to send me a note, I will get you one in the mail. The week after that, or 2 weeks after that, the week after that is Claude Hall's Las Vegas Gun Show. That's at the Sports Center. We'll be there also with a table. They don't do passes, but I love that show. It's a little neighborhood show. It's really kind of nice. Anyway, Crossroads on August 26 and 27 downtown at Cashman Field. There were rumors out that Cashman was shutting down the No More Gun Shows. There are no more gun shows after the end of this year. They're honoring the commitments they had from people, despite the fact that Carolyn Goodman's putting a soccer team in there, which is probably good for the community. It's crappy for gun shows. Anyway, we will be back here next week. Lenny will be here. I'm seeing what attorney I can get on so we can talk about some serious ramifications of terrorism and what to do and what not to do. We will be here then Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. And the radio show is on Sunday. They rebroadcast this broadcast on KSHP Radio, 1400 AM on your dial.
If I can, in the next week's show, we're going to go into a lot more detail. We talked about it, so I'm gonna be back next week. We're going to talk a lot more about what to do. I would caution everybody between now and then to be a little bit more vigilant, especially if you are somewhere in a tourist area or a large crowd. I'm not telling you to be paranoid. I'm telling you to be more vigilant. If you live here in the Las Vegas area and you're wherever you're going to go and you have your CCW permit, make sure you take your gun with you. A lot of this, and I'll go into more detail next week, but with the recent, since January, mid-January of this year, with the change of administration, what's going on in Syria, you know, in Iraq, they took Mosul back from ISIS. They are working on taking Raqqa, which is the capital in Syria, where the ISIS claims their capital of their caliphate. I think you're going to see more of this in the coming weeks because they're putting a lot of pressure on these guys overseas. And so I would ask you to be just a little more vigilant. Next week, please tune in. I'm going to have a lot more for you, things to think about, things to look for, things that you as an average person can do. You don't have to be a Navy SEAL or a counterterrorism trained military person to be able to survive one of these incidents. You have to be vigilant, though, and you have to be observant, and you have to be ready. And those are the things that we're going to talk about next week. I'm going to reach out to my sources in this world and see what I can come up with as far as a little bit more as far as by that time we'll have more information come out about what's going on, what we can talk about there. I'm going to talk some more. We're going to talk about, and it was a terrorist attack in Virginia, but I'm also going to talk about some other things next week as far as the demonstrations. And you know, I talked to Bob about it, and we were discussing it because you could be somewhere and get really tied up in one of these pretty quickly, especially if law enforcement has been told to stand down, like they appear to have been told to stand down, both state and local law enforcement in the Charlottesville, Virginia area. So we're going to talk more about that next week, about what to do, how to get out of those. I would just remind everybody that, you know, you have your right to free speech guaranteed under the Constitution. You don't have to like it, but you can't stifle it with violence or aggression on any side.
But if I put like a reasonable sign on my baseball bat, okay, never mind. We'll talk about that.
I'll put a reasonable sign in front of my front sight. How's that? Smile, wait for the flash.
We are right up on time. I thank you very much for listening to Fired Up. It'll be a great show next week. I really look forward to it. You're going to find a very knowledgeable guy here, and I will just shut up and let you. I will shut up and let Lenny talk. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be here next week. Be sure to tell your friends counterterrorism is going to be what civilians can do, how you can protect yourself, how to pay attention. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you all next week.